Steve, tell me, when was the last time you took a train?
Just a few weeks ago when I went to pick up my car from the workshop. Took about 4 or 5 stops.
Do you remember how much you paid?
It was about $1 something. But what blew me away was when I discovered how much my kids pay when they take the train. So they take the train, and guess what? Regular fare, 70 cents.
Okay.
But now they get in the train before like 7:45. And
Yes.
you know how much it is, right? 20 cents.
No way.
Yeah, I found out for my son. I was like, what? I said, I'm never taking you to school again. Go on your own, man.
Okay, 20 cents is quite affordable, right? I mean, it's like,
super affordable.
what can you buy for 20 cents nowadays? I don't think.
I don't know, nothing.
So I take the bus and the train every
Yeah.
day. Per day, if I'm
Yeah.
coming from home to office and then office to home, it's about $4. Per trip is about $2.
Okay.
Yeah, which, I feel like it's such a good amount for me. It's a good deal because I'm taking a bus from my home
Okay.
to the train station, and I'm swapping to another, like 2 different
Right.
lines over 20 kilometers.
All that for just like, what, 4, not even $5, right?
If I'm tempted to just get a Grab at
One
the
way will
time,
cost you, what?
30 something.
Oh, there you go. Come 20 December, you will pay more. The Public Transport Council, or PTC, has said in its latest review, adults will pay 10 cents more per journey, and for concession card holders like students, seniors, the elderly, it's 4 cents more. So we send our trusty intern out to get sort of the feel on the ground. Yun went to Yishun Interchange because that's where the action always is, right? Why? Tell us. What did you discover? What did you find out?
So the consensus that I kind of got was that people just aren't too happy about the fact that they have to pay more. And I think that the feeling of being financially squished is one that came out a lot. People do understand that prices have to go up because obviously there's inflation, there's rising cost of living. But when it comes to public transport, they're unhappy because it's such an everyday necessary expenditure. Some people that I spoke to actually pointed out, as compared to other countries where there are other alternatives.
Right.
Yeah, in Singapore, car ownership is still so elusive.
So they feel that paying more for public transport, even though in this case it's only 10 cents more per journey, is still, they shouldn't have to do it.
Yeah, they just feel like it should be more economical and there should be as little price increases as possible because it's something that they have to fork out every day. They can't like opt out of it. And like day in, day out, they have to keep tapping that card. And when it increases, it's like hard for you not to have that nagging gripe at the back of your mind. Like, oh, why is this increasing again?
Did anyone ask for free transport? Do they expect that the government should sort of take care of this area since it's a basic necessity?
No, actually. I think people are quite understanding. But when it increases and then there's that like unhappy feeling.
10 cents, 4 cents, is it common sense or nonsense? We'll find out. Thank you, YY. We can take the MRT home.
Today, we want to find out how these increases are calculated, how government subsidies work, and what might be more sustainable in the long run.
So actually, there have been no price increases in terms of the fares in 2020. That was during COVID.
Yep.
But now, every year since then, from 2021, it's been anything between 3 and 11 cents for adults and 1 to 5 cents for students, senior citizens, lower wage workers, those with disabilities. So first, help us understand how the PTC actually decides on how much to increase fares by. And there's a formula I hear they use, right? Terence, what is this formula?
There are actually one part which gives the PTC the power of up to a certain percent of increases. You're authorized to increase to this level. And it's up to the PTC's discretion in any particular year to decide, are we going to use the full amount or are we going to use a bit less and so on.
Sure.
So the formula is to tell you that you can increase up to this amount based on all these different conditions.
Well, it doesn't quite say up to. It just says this is the amount. But the PTC kind of says, okay, is this a bit too much? If not, they would take some discretion and then say, okay, let's based on whatever that they find in that year. And last year they looked at like wage increases and that sort of thing. And they realized that the cost increases that are allowed in the formula was a bit high relative to what people were getting in terms of wage increases. So they decided only to stick to the amount that is more or less in line with the average wage increase.
Okay.
So they have this discretion.
But first, the formula, that number we're saying, that up to number is actually 18.9%. That's what the formula came up with for 2024, right? But they've decided to increase it by just 6%. So tell us how that works. How do they come up with that 18.9%?
Okay, I think the 18.9 is lumped with some of the previous year's increases. Remember,
Right.
each year
Yep.
they are allowed up to that amount that they could actually increase up
Okay.
to. So in the past few years, what happened was that they have not been using the full amount.
Okay.
So they've been kind of using only a little bit.
Ah.
And so then they're going to say, okay, the rest of it, we're going to kick it to next year. So that's why we have this accumulated sort of 18%, which sounds very big. But there's sort of been accumulated and
Which means next year it'll be even higher. And it just gets higher and
No,
higher.
but that's why he says they have the discretion to decide that they will not pick the full amount.
yes.
I know, but the full
Right.
amount is going to get higher every year because
But at least from the rider's perspective, you're saving 1 year's fare increase from the
Right.
whatever the
Okay.
amount first. So then in that sense, it's not so painful.
You mentioned there's wage increases, there's energy prices, there's inflation. That's kind of the mathematical thing, right?
There are 5 things, so as you just mentioned. So there's this consumer price index, so
Yes.
they look at. They have this wage increase, wage index, however they define that. And then they have the energy components because, I mean, as you know, the trains and the buses and so on, they use a lot of energy. So there are
intensive.
3 of these key core components that
Okay.
they many years ago started
Okay.
with.
Mm.
And then in addition, in the past 10, 15 years, they've added one more, which is the productivity improvement. So because over the years, if the bus or trains companies, if they improve in their productivity, if they manage to save some costs here and there, so part of that will also accrue to this fare. So the riders, commuters also benefit.
So
if,
it's like a discount.
yeah, you can think of it that way.
Okay.
And then just before the pandemic, they had instituted the network adjustment factor. So what that meant was that, remember there are only 2 lines not too long ago in
Yeah,
terms of
yeah.
trains and the
But now
buses.
that
There are like many. There are like so
Yes.
many colors, right?
yeah.
So then the question is, well, at what point should the riders sort of pay more for the fact that, well, there are more lines and now on buses, you're more likely to find a seat.
Yep.
let's talk about the costs of running these trains, these buses. I mean, Raymond, you come in on this because let's assume, okay, so now we've got that increase that's coming in, which means if I'm paying $2 for my fare, because it's an 18.9% increase, if it were to go to the extreme, will be $2.37. A 6% increase, $2.12. So that's what I'm going to pay. Is this accurate? Does it actually cover any of the costs of running those lines?
We have to understand that in terms of running railway services or even the bus services, they are what we call basically infrastructure or rolling stock investment costs, which are basically capital costs that is actually used to actually provide for your new MRT stations, your new MRT lines, your new buses that you actually get to see.
Those are not cheap, right?
Basically. That's not cheap. At the same time, there's also a maintenance of existing lines that's growing old, such as our North-South line and the East-West line, which are so old, about 40 years old. I mean, that we are looking at today.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there is also an operational cost from the operators, basically running the services, maintaining the lines,
paying the
and
salaries.
paying the salaries of our workers and all this. So this is a huge cost that we are talking about.
Okay.
No public transport company in the world are making money.
Okay.
And there's a huge subsidy, and we can see that there's actually 2 billion of subsidies. And if we are deferring this 18%, okay, what's going to happen is it will create more subsidy that the government have to pay. And this will actually eventually be borne by all the taxpayers.
We're sort of operating in a subsidy mode, which means it just covering the operating costs. The fare revenue right now don't really cover the operating costs.
Right.
And we're not even talking about infrastructure, which meant like drilling the tunnels, that sort of thing. So the infrastructure part is sort of like all gone. The government has somehow,
So the government says, don't worry, I'll take care of the biggest cost here.
Yes.
Which is building the infrastructure, etc.
Right.
The rail and train bus operators, they say, okay, we'll do the running for you, the maintaining for you.
Yes, but then they don't get all the fares.
So where do the fares go? That money that I pay, who
the
gets to
fare
keep it?
goes to the Land Transport Authority. Some some aspects of it.
Okay.
So what they've done over the past 10 years or so is that they have moved these operating companies, bus and trains,
Yes.
onto what is called new financing framework.
Yeah.
So in that framework, what happens is that these companies don't own the buses and trains anymore.
Right.
So they kind of just run them, and so they kind of every 5 or 10 years, depending on the contract, they will have to bid. So they're kind of bidding, I think, in terms of providing a lower cost estimates of how much it's going to cost them to run. And LTA would just say, we'll give you that amount.
Okay.
And we will have some adjustments based on our actual ridership, or is it like COVID when the ridership really fell and then they say,
Right.
okay, fine, we will give you this minimum. So
Yeah.
there's a base amount and then some adjustments.
But SMRT and SBS are profit making, right?
If we look purely based on operations in Singapore, it's not making money. Companies such as SBST and their mother company like ComfortDelGro, they actually has a lot of investments overseas. And those are actually making quite a bit of money. And especially they have been investing in UK, Australia, and they are running lines that are profitable. And in a way, the profits actually mainly came from that part. If we look at perhaps SMRT, they have been trying very hard to make sure that they are profitable, and they're actually investing a lot into non-real business, such as having more lifestyle apps.
This kind of makes sense. So you are run like a private company. You are your intention is to make a profit. Just don't profit from the people you serve in Singapore.
They do have some other businesses that are sort of more on the prowl for profits.
Yes.
But here for public transport, the buses and trains, it's not like they're completely separated from the profit. It's just that they
Right.
are trying to maintain a very productive kind of operation, cost-efficient operation, so that they can earn from whatever they get from LTA.
So
Which is-
why not make it clean? Like make it a national
Yeah,
thing? Like
have the
so some
government
people
Have the
argue
whole thing.
that the government should just pay for buses and trains.
Well, okay, so right now, the LTA gives them the revenue,
Yeah.
okay? And then they have a cost. So that's where the difference, so that's why we're talking about the subsidies. The government has to subsidize it. But you can argue both ways. Many years ago, there was only one
Yes.
train operators, right?
Correct.
And even for buses for a long time, there's one bigger bus company than the other.
That's right.
So it's not like we
Didn't
didn't
have that.
actually have that. We had that. But over the years, what happens is that if you have one big company or one company, the issue is, do you really trust them on the cost? So our companies, by and large, they have been operating pretty well.
Right.
So we trust them. But then you can also ask back in, Raymond was just mentioning at some point in time, there's some reliability issues. So, if everything was
Right.
right, why was that? What was those things happening? So one could argue. But one could also argue now the time, that lesson has been learned
That's right.
and it's time to turn the page. So I think you can kind of see it
Okay.
both ways, right?
And I think it's basically a situation where we are thinking about, are we going to have a dominant player and a minor player in the market, or simply to have a single player in the market?
Yes.
And I think this really depends on whether the players involved, are they actually performing up to par, and the cost structure of the organization, if it's a single player, is it really benefiting the commuters?
Our intern Yan Yun, she went to Yishun Interchange and spoke to a few people, and no surprises. They all say,
I don't want to pay more.
I can see the way they've organized it, right? So adults bear the brunt of the increase. So 10 cents is acceptable to some extent
10 cents if you use the card.
if you use a card. Yeah.
I
More
think
if you use
somewhere
cash.
if you use cash, there's no change.
Mm.
So if you really want to stick to, I don't want to change, and use the cash fare.
Explain to us, how they land at these, amounts. Like, do you think 10 cents is acceptable? Like, is there a hard cap, in other words? Would they say, you know what,
Anything beyond...
anything beyond 12 cents cannot really, people will not accept. Or it all boils down to the formula, and what the PTC feels is, the environment.
How did they come up with 6%?
I think you need to invite the PTC at the end next time.
They did, and they didn't
Yeah.
want to come.
Scared.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, based on last year, what they said was that, they were allowed a bigger increase. What is a fair amount?
Yeah.
So from what we understood is that they actually looked at the sort of the mean or average wage increases
Yes.
and then sort of say, well, if on average people are only getting 6% or around there of increases, let's not have it like excessively more than
okay.
that.
But some
that's
people
where
don't even get 6% increase.
Yeah, a year-on-year increase is not 6%. I'm pretty sure if I look back at my
Some
payslip.
people lost their jobs.
Yeah,
too,
that's
so,
true.
what happened, you see.
I think that any price increase to the public, they will not be really happy.
Yeah.
But if you look from the point whereby we know that we have a backlog of 18%, and next year it will just increase.
Yeah.
The following year it just increase, and will it just be spiraling down towards forever ever increasing subsidies?
Yes.
And it's basically about fiscal responsibility until a certain point in time. So I believe that that's why I think PTC will actually have to explain to the public in a sense that 10% is somewhat reasonable compared to maybe the full load of maybe 3 times of the 10 cents.
Yeah, so it's I think most people don't really have a understand. At least I didn't. How much it costs, to really run an efficient thing. Okay, so Terence, you've said that, we do this a lot. We like to compare to other cities.
Yeah.
And so Paris, for example, London, and we've been there, right? I mean, the fares can be quite expensive.
Yep.
And frankly, I mean, the ride isn't that clean. So for us, comparatively, it's about value, right?
What is the simplest would be the single sort of adult fare.
Yes.
That's usually the benchmark. And if you take that as a benchmark, then Singapore by far and consistently over the past decade has been the lowest among many places in the developed world and maybe even some of the developing world. So there's no dispute. But some of my students, especially exchange students, will come and tell me, you know what, that's not the real benchmark because most of them, they don't pay the full adult fare. So many in other places, in other countries, they'll buy the monthly passes or whatever the concessionaire fares.
Yeah.
And if you compare the monthly passes, we may not stack up as well as if you were to compare just the single adult fare.
Right. Because most people don't use that. You're right.
Well, I mean,
if you're traveling every day, you'd go for the best deal and get your
You
monthly
would,
concession
right?
card.
I have to say that in terms of a commuter like me who is actually taking public transport, I actually compare about my monthly expenses on bus and rail versus that of a monthly concession and whether it makes sense for me or not. And actually there's an optimal distance of sorts that I need to travel to make the monthly concession fare optimal for me to purchase it.
So you didn't, right? So you decided just to use the regular fare.
I actually get the regular fare because based on my own frequency and my analysis of distance that I'm traveling is actually more optimal for me to actually get a cheaper option.
I did the exact same thing. So I take the train bus quite often. And so the concession fare would have been a bit more than I would pay on a monthly basis when I calculated it. I don't do 4 trips a day.
And remember, we still have this work from home for, a day
that's
or two,
right.
for
So
many.
unless you live in Changi and travel to Tuas every day, it may not make sense, right?
Yeah, it makes sense for sure.
Then it would make sense.
Well, you don't have to go that far.
You found out, right, that your kids were...
Oh yeah, my kids, they used 70 cents is the regular fare, but if they go in pre-peak before 7:45, they get 50 cents off, which means it's 20 cents a ride. I was like, you are forever taking the MRT to school. I'm not sending you anymore.
and that's true, I think, for the CBD also, right?
Yes.
So it's not just for the kids. It's
No,
for
it's not.
50 cents
It's
off.
everybody.
You'll be
It's
right.
50 cents
That's
off.
right. But if we look at this, I mean, yes, 10 cents seems like it could be a bit, but when we look at the rest of the world, actually, it does feel like we're still getting a pretty good deal.
Yes, we are. There's no apps. There's no dispute about that.
Yeah.
But if you were asked to ask the question, are there places where there's even less of an increase or no increase? There are. So we are very good. We're definitely on the forefront.
Do we have to worry that at some point, one day they may say, okay, that 18.9% now has become 25%, and we've got to put it all in because the government says we're short of money, then that will happen, right?
Well, let's not forget that in some of the components of the fare, there is this thing called the energy index.
Yep.
And in the past 10 years, around 2016, there was actually a drop in the energy costs and also in the year 2020. So it's not inconceivable.
Depends on how energetic they are.
Well, yeah. I mean,
And then, which means it's not inconceivable for fares to go down too. Is
Yeah.
what he's
Yeah.
saying.
That's true.
But that's not gonna happen. No
I mean, why
way.
would you, right? It's
when it does, I'm afraid that job losses may be an issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know what you want to pray for.
Costs will always increase, but I feel like raising fares, cannot be the only option, right? I mean, obviously government subsidies help. In the long run, Raymond, what do you think is a sustainable solution?
I think we also have to be a bit realistic about our expectations on public transport. One of the portion of the cost is the cost of manpower and the reliability of a network. So if you want to have a really, really 99.999% of reliable network, there's a cost to pay for it. But are we okay with a 99% or 98%? And with that, there will be a cost reduction. So, but that's a question that we have to really openly ask and to see whether are Singaporeans amenable to this.
The answer will be no, I think.
No, but it's managing expectations
They-
because we're so used to things working well, working efficiently all the time.
Yeah.
Do you know
but
in the-
remember,
but-
we have more lines now for rail. So
That's
you used to
true.
be 2 lines. If something fails, half the
But-
population can't.
Ironically, if it happens often enough, after a while you'll be like, all right, I just give more time for each trip I have and know that something may
No,
go
but
wrong.
then there'll be people who say, hey, you increased my fares, and then the train, breaks down and doesn't.
No, so
Yeah,
they...
so there are two, there are two
Yeah.
groups of people,
Yeah.
right? I mean, there are people who
Correct.
actually told us, I don't know why they keep increasing because the bus is quite dirty. I'm like, the bus is dirty? I don't know. I never had a dirty
People
bus.
have to go outside of Singapore.
I think we are quite sheltered here in Singapore from a lot of the other things around the world. I mean, we've done well, we've been fortunate, and we've got resources to help keep us going, but that may not always be the case. So I think we have to bear that in mind.
Yeah, for me, it's all. I mean, I was sharing with Stephen that I'm quite a heavy public transport user, and I love it.
Yeah.
Because
Takes the train just for fun.
There's so many retail shops,
I know,
by
you're
the
like-
way. It's
Let me check out
worthwhile.
Ang Mo Kio
no,
interchange.
no.
There's a lot of these niche food places as well, so it's worthwhile to
True.
just go
Terence,
beyond
sounds like
your.
you've done it before.
Yeah, I mean,
but
it's
it's-
worthwhile.
Honestly, I'll tell you. Okay, so I could drive to
Yeah.
work, but it takes me pretty much the same amount of time than if I jumped on the Thomson East Coast line. And of course, I'm less angry too because there's no traffic jams and
Yeah, you
people
get
like
to use your phone and just chill,
exactly
right?
listen to
Yeah.
podcasts, etc. And then when I step off, I'm thinking, okay, this cost me $2.
Yeah.
And I have, people I know who order a Grab, and during the time that I'm taking the train, it's about $30.
We try and find the best average option in that sense, the best option that works for the most people. But yeah, different folks, different strokes, right?
But it also depends on your place of work and where you stay, whether you can actually
Yeah.
go, when it's pouring rain outside, can you go
Ooh.
in a nice dress or suit
Yeah,
and
yeah.
arrive sort of unscathed,
Yeah.
So that's
True.
the other issue.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining and sharing this discussion with us. If you have any thoughts on what you've heard, feel free to drop us a comment on, the usual platforms. Of course, it's on YouTube as well. But otherwise, a big shout out to our team, and they are
Junaini Johari, Tiffany Ang, To Yen Yun, Joanne Chan, and Saya Wins. Video editing is by Hanida Amin, and sound mixing by Ken Delbridge. See you guys next week.
bye for now.